At the time, people were saying, hey, you can't get rid of type 2 diabetes. It's chronic, it's progressive, it's irreversible. And I said, well, that's completely untrue.
You often say that control the hunger, not the calories.
The problem in modern society is that fasting period has shrunk so low because of the convenience of food, people eating all the time, people eating whenever they want. Now the attitude is like, you can eat anytime you want. It's like, but where did we get that attitude from?
What's on your mind matters more than what's on your plate. The real work happens in shifting a patient's relationship with food.
Everything derives from your mindset. Where you grew up makes a big difference. Same, it's the social situation. If you think it's really all about the diet, then you've already lost.
您现在收看的是精华版，如果要看完整版的话，请点击下方连结加入官方 LINE。Welcome to the Genesis Conversations. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Fung. Today, we're joined by a pioneer in metabolic health, Dr. Jason Fung. Over the past decade, Dr. Jason Fung has authored a series of groundbreaking work that have shifted the global conversation on chronic diseases. In 2016, he released The Complete Guide to Fasting and the international bestseller, The Obesity Code. In his latest work, The Hunger Code, dismantles the fundamental flaws of the caloric model. If you have followed the traditional eat less, move more idea, you would only find yourself back to square one. Today, we are going to explore why this is happening. The core issue is not a lack of willpower over calories, it is the biology of hunger. So, Dr. Fung, it's really a privilege to have you here.
Well, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. As a kidney specialist, I didn't originally have much interest in the field, but over time, I'm seeing more and more type 2 diabetes. And then I sort of recognized that I had been treating it sort of all wrong. And at the time, people were saying, hey, you can't get rid of type 2 diabetes. It's chronic, it's progressive, it's irreversible. And I said, well, that's completely untrue because every single person, every doctor, every patient knows that if you simply lose weight, then your type 2 diabetes will either get much better or go away. So again, if you follow the line of causation from diabetic kidney disease, then you need to get rid of the diabetes, which means you need to get people to lose weight. And that's where I became very, very interested in what causes weight gain. And at the time, the standard thinking and what I grew up with, what I was taught, find its calories out, so simply eat less. The problem is that it was very unsuccessful and it wasn't even true. Because again, if you think about it, it didn't make logical sense. If you give somebody more calories by telling them to eat more, they don't necessarily gain weight. And there's been lots of overfeeding studies that have showed that, where you force people to eat, they gain weight for a short period of time. When you stop the study, they'll actually lose all that weight. If it goes on the other side too, if you lose weight by cutting your calories, you'll lose weight for a period of time, but over time, you'll regain it all. If you think about weight gain, there are medical causes of weight gain. For example, we know that if you give somebody insulin, they will gain weight. If you take away insulin, like type 1 diabetes, they will lose weight. I don't care how much willpower or discipline you have. Nicotine, when people smoked, they lost weight. None of these things have calories. They don't restrict calories in any way. But what they do is they change the hormonal balance, which leads to the weight gain or weight loss. Same thing with the new drugs, the GLP-1s. They don't restrict the number of calories that you want to eat. You can eat as many calories as you want, but the key is you don't want to. So how can you say the problem with weight gain is calories when you know that hormones like insulin?
You often say that control the hunger, not the calories. So from a clinical standpoint, why is addressing the drive to eat the most, if not the only, sustainable path to success? And how should we distinguish between biological hunger and the conditioned cues that drive our behavior?
You have to understand that when we eat and when we stop eating, it's not because of calories. For example, you could eat a 3-egg omelet, for example, with vegetables in the morning, and maybe it's about 800 calories, for example. And that will keep you quite full, right? It's a big breakfast, right? Or you could eat a donut and a sugary coffee drink, right? And that's also 800 calories. But you're going to be hungry not even 10 minutes later, because it really didn't make you full at all. So the number of calories is not the major reason why we eat or why we stop eating, because it's like some foods are going to make you full and some foods are not going to make you full. And there's a huge difference, but the difference is not calories. Every successful medical weight loss treatment, such as Ozempic and, they talk about GLP-1, GIP, now glucagon, right? All of those, what do they have in common? One, they affect hormonal systems, and two, they affect hunger, not calories. So if you're trying to do it without the drugs, then you have to understand what is causing the hunger, because it could be the physical homeostatic hunger, but more commonly, it's not. More commonly, it's the hedonic hunger, the emotional side, or the social side. We also eat because it feels good. So when you eat dessert or when you eat sugary snacks and so on, and that's this idea of comfort foods. When you're depressed, you might eat because it makes you feel better. It sets off dopamine. It sets off a reward system. And the problem is that if you're eating because you're bored or you're depressed or whatever, not because you are actually physically hungry, but you have this emotional hunger, which in scientific terms is called hedonic hunger. And there's a third reason why you eat, which is simply that it's what's expected. This is called a sort of social hunger, which is called conditioned hunger. So if you are always eating in front of the TV, well, as soon as you get in front of the TV, you're going to want to eat. So you're creating more hunger by pairing these two things, because you've paired these things in your mind. As soon as you do one, you want the other. And that's a completely different situation because you're creating all this hunger. There's been many times I've been quite full from lunch or whatever, but because I was in that social situation where I'm going out for dinner, I wound up eating a completely normal meal. The conditioning, right? It's the social situation. Right. It's the sitting down at the restaurant with your friends and all that sort of stuff, and start to create the hunger again. So the key is really mindfulness, right? You have to understand, am I really eating because I'm hungry?
I recall there was a paper published in NEJM also stated that if you have a sibling who is obese, you have 43% chance more risk than ordinary people to get obese. So there was a point people kind of joke about obesity being a contagious disease. So it's kind of back to your conditioning cues.
Exactly right. And that was a very interesting study, because what they found was that obesity actually spreads very much like a virus, right? If your friends are always eating French fries, you're eating French fries. That's just the way it is. There's another study I pointed out where if you look at military families, so in the United States, people will get posted to different bases, so they'll move around the country. So if you take a family and put them in a place where there's a very high obesity rate, their risk of obesity goes up significantly. The family is the same family, but it's where you put them. If everybody around you is eating French fries and fried foods and junk foods and ultra-processed foods, that's going to affect you. So we focus so much on the individual. Oh, it's willpower, it's discipline, it's your diet. But in fact, the difference is where you live.
Exactly. So in your first, the global bestseller, The Obesity Code, you fundamentally changed the conversation around the central hormone insulin. And just like you described, is there sort of a body fat thermostat, so to speak?
Exactly. So there's two sort of things. One is the growing recognition of this sort of body fat thermostat. It's really a core biological principle called homeostasis. So your body wants to maintain a stable level no matter what it is outside. So it's like your room thermostat. When it's hot outside, it turns on the air conditioning. When it's cold outside, it turns on the heat. But either way, you're maintaining that balance. And your body does the same thing for virtually everything. So you have a body temperature. When it's hot outside, you sweat. When it's cold outside, you shiver. If you drink a lot of water, you're going to pee it out. If you don't drink a lot of water, you're not going to pee it out. Your body needs to maintain that balance. And the amount of body fat you carry is also set at that balance. And that's important. If you think about survival, if you carry too much body weight, if you're too fat, you're going to die because something will eat you, because you can't run very fast. If you carry too little body fat, you're also going to die because you can't survive winter when there's not much food available. So you want to have this level of body fat that is sort of right. And that's set by hormones. Certain hormones are going to push your body fat thermostat, tell your body to carry more. Just like if you go into a room and it's too hot, you don't say, oh, it's simple. It's just heat in minus heat out. You don't say that. You say, who set the thermostat so high, right? And then you simply dial it down. That's the treatment. Same thing with body fat thermostat. If you have hormones that are pushing it up, so insulin's going to push it up. We know that because when you give it, you gain weight. Cortisol is going to push it up. But equally, you also have hormones that push it down. So GLP-1 is an example. But there's all these other hormones such as testosterone, estrogen. So if you treat somebody and take away all their testosterone, which happens in, say, prostate cancer, when you take away testosterone, testosterone, people lose muscle and gain fat. Same thing with estrogen. When women go through menopause, they reliably gain weight. Not because they change their diet, not because they have less or more willpower, but because there's changes in estrogen and progesterone. So the question is, just like that room that's too hot, you say, why is the room too hot? Well, who set the thermostat so high? If your weight is too high, you have to say, who set this body fat thermostat so high? What are the hormones involved? All of these different things are going to adjust it up or down.
I really couldn't agree more. I have the same experience of my patients. We realized that early on that simply prescribing a diet is not enough. So by pairing patients with a dedicated nutritionist for daily feedback and real-time strategy, the real work happens in shifting a patient's relationship with food. So in your experience, how critical is the behavioral reset phase?
That's why having somebody who's available, like having a peer group, which is have group sessions where people see other people and learn from other people. We've always used group sessions because it's well for other diseases. If you think it's really all about the diet, then you've already lost.
If you have tried all kinds of ways to lose weight and still feel stuck, or you're not sure how to eat in a way that truly fits your body right now, I would recommend checking out COFIT's one-on-one nutritionist consultation. A nutritionist will work with you based on your eating habit, body composition, and hormone type assessment to help identify what may be getting in the way and give you a clearer and more realistic direction that's easier to follow. The program is fully online, with support available in Mandarin, English, and Cantonese, so you can join from wherever you are. Feel free to use the promo code and click the link below to sign up. Dr. Fung, I'm going to ask some questions from your book. You have synthesized your approach into what you call the 3 golden rules of weight loss. So the first rule is the elimination of ultra-processed food, which you have described as the adult baby food. And what is the most practical way for patients to identify them in a crowded supermarket?
Yeah, so I think that the golden rules sort of cut across the 3 different types of hunger. So when you look at ultra-processed foods, there's the physiological side. That is, they tend to stimulate a lot of insulin because they're very easily digested and absorbed very quickly, that they actually cause a much higher spike in insulin than you would normally see. So that's the physiologic side of things. But you also have the emotional side of things, which is that a lot of these ultra-processed foods, they tend to sort of really stimulate the reward centers in our brain. And again, that's not by accident, because a lot of these foods are actually sort of tweaked because they have focus groups and they say, oh, how much sugar and salt and fat and how much chemical do I add, artificial sweeteners, artificial flavors, or how do you maximize the pleasure and turn down the satiety? So not just the physiologic, but also the emotional side of things. It gives you this very big high. Then also, because they're also very, very easy, right? They come in a nice, convenient package, or it makes it easy. So it makes it easy to become a habit, right? But the ultra-processed foods are so convenient that it cuts across all the different types of hunger, and that's the real problem. And they've really taken over a lot of the diet. In some cases, it's 50 to 70% of the diet is ultra-processed foods. And it goes beyond simply the number of calories or the number of carbs, or because it affects all 3 dimensions of the eating behavior.
Let me ask your golden rule number 2, the science of fasting. So while the public often confuses fasting with starvation, we know it's about metabolic switching. So from a medical perspective, how does entering a fasting state effectively flip the switch from insulin-driven fat storage to active fat burning?
When you don't eat, your insulin is going to drop and your body's going to release calories. So during part of the day, you're going to eat, which is your feeding time, which is you're going to store calories. And then part of the day, you want to fast, where you're going to release calories. So as you do this metabolic flexibility, you're able to use your fat stores more easily. The problem in modern society is that that fasting period has shrunk so low because of the convenience of food, people eating all the time, people eating whenever they want. Now the attitude is like, you can eat anytime you want. It's like, but where did we get that attitude from? It was driven, I think, by snack food companies.
So I'm going to ask you your golden rule number 3, mindset and social systems. You have noted that what's on your mind matters more than what's on your plate. Why is a robust social and psychological system clinically more effective for long-term health?
And this is exactly that. You have to redesign your physical and social environment so that you become successful, because it's actually the most important predictor. Everything derives from your mindset. Where you grew up makes a big difference. Same, it's the social situations. If you look at a Japanese person in Japan, their risk of obesity is quite low. They have one of the lowest obesity rates in the world. Now you take that Japanese person and move them to the United States, San Francisco. Their risk of obesity immediately goes up. And then within a generation or two, their risk of obesity is the same as an American. Again, what's the difference? There's not a genetic difference because they're Japanese. They have Japanese values, but the environment they're in, you're going to go to the mall and you're going to eat this, or you're going to see, oh, hey, there's this, sugary drinks all over the place, right? You're going to start drinking them because that's the environment you're in. If the environment doesn't allow you to do that, then you're not going to do that, right? So think about this. If you have a school with 100 children and one fails, well, maybe that's the child's fault. But what if 70 of the 100 children fail? Would you say it's the child's fault, or would you say it's the school's fault? Clearly, it's a school fault, right? It's something in that learning environment in the school that's at risk, not the children's fault. You have the same thing in the United States. 70% of people are obese or overweight. Is it an individual failing, or is it an environmental failing? I think we have to look at the bigger environmental issues, right? And that's where you're going to make a difference.
Indeed. I'm going to play it again with you now. We have a rapid fire. Are high-carb Asian diets inherently more likely to drive weight gain?
Not necessarily. It all depends on the insulin response. And there's ways to affect the insulin response, whether it's from, what you eat, how you eat it, and the amount you eat.
What is your top safety tip for someone attempting a fast longer than 24 hours?
I think you need to make sure that if you're on medications, particularly, that you're monitoring. So two main ones would be if you're on blood sugar medications, you need to make sure you monitor it. If you're on blood pressure medications, you need to monitor it, because in those cases, it may have an effect where your blood sugar goes down, which is good. That's what you're doing, but that's what you want to happen. But if you're also taking the other medications to lower the blood sugar, it could go too low.
Fixed meal times versus eating only when hungry. What would you prefer?
Eating when you're hungry is the best way, but it's not always the most practical way. And that's where, you see the difference in children. Children eat when they're hungry. So that's why when they have mealtime, sometimes you can't force them to eat. Physiologically, it's much better. But to fit into society, we wind up having to eat at mealtime.
Is it actually possible to increase food volume and still lose weight?
Oh, absolutely. Because it's the hormones that are important, not the number of calories. I mean, there's a link between how much you eat and how much you stimulate hormones such as insulin, for example. But it's not a one-to-one. So it's certainly the case that you could eat more and still lose weight.
Do you believe that these GLP-1 medications are the magic pill we've been waiting for?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. Keep in mind that I actually prescribe a lot of GLP-1s. Why? Because they do have renal protection. However, when you look at large data sets, what you really find is very few people actually remain on these drugs. If you reduce the drive to eat by affecting this homeostatic hunger, what happens is that you don't want to eat, but you also don't get the pleasure of eating, right? Because think about a time that you've really eaten a lot. You went to a buffet, you ate a lot, and somebody said, here, have a steak. You'd say, oh, I'm going to throw up. I prescribe this, and this is for good medical indications for kidney disease and so on. I actually struggle to keep people on it.
For those who are underweight, what is the best way to achieve healthy weight gain?
Again, the most important thing is still going to be eating natural foods. If you can gain weight by eating a lot of junk food, for example, but it's not sort of a healthy weight gain, because now you may wind up just gaining fat. You
suggested that vinegar and lemon juice to potentially reduce the insulin response by up to 50%?
What happens is that organic acid blocks the salivary amylase, which is the enzyme that breaks down the carbohydrate. So by inhibiting that amylase, the absorption of that carbohydrate is much slower. So therefore, it's sort of, you can't digest it as quickly, which means that when it goes up into the bloodstream, it goes up much slower, which means there's less insulin response. So that's very interesting, because you see that a lot of traditional foods, like high carbohydrate foods, are often paired with vinegar. So you have sushi rice, which is vinegar. You have a lot of fermented vegetables, pickled vegetables like sauerkraut and kimchi. And maybe that's not a coincidence, because people have recognized, hey, this actually increases satiety because it slows down the absorption.
If calorie counting is so ineffective, why does it remain the dominant medical advice?
I think it's just because it's been repeated over and over again. It's sort of like this idea that science advances one funeral at a time, right? Because the people who have built their careers on saying that it's all about calories, they're still in power. So they're still spreading their views. It's when people start to change, that's when you start to see it, right?
What is the easiest way for a patient to distinguish between true hunger and maybe fake or emotional hunger?
I think they're all types of true hunger. It's just a different form of hunger. One of the best ways really is to do a longer fast. Then you'll actually understand what physical hunger is. You'll realize that most of the time, that's not why you're eating. It's the other side of the hunger equation that mostly drives your eating decisions, whether it's habit, like, it's lunchtime, so you eat. Or it's because, it's like, I really want to eat this food because it's delicious. That's what drives it mostly.
What is the single most important piece of advice for someone newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes?
One, make sure it is type 2 diabetes and not type 1 diabetes. For adults, it's almost always assumed that you have type 2 and therefore type 1 is never considered, but they are really opposite diseases. So understand sort of what it is that you're dealing with. And number two is to understand if it is type 2 diabetes, that it is a dietary disease. And therefore, the drugs are not going to fix the disease. You have to fix the diet.
Great. Well, Dr. Fung, it has been such a pleasure to have you here. I think your idea of the insulin as the cause of insulin resistance, I think many endocrinologists don't understand that or don't agree with that.
They don't understand. It's boggling.
I actually spend a lot of time lecturing using your slides. That kind of understanding helps me a lot in treating my patients.
If there's anything I can do to help, let me know, because I'm very interested and passionate about that. So thank you so much. Let's keep in touch. I mean, this has been great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.